We heard from the leader of Scottish Labour as Sir Keir Starmer takes his party's fight to Scotland. Not everyone convinced of the Labour leader's plan for reforming energy in the UK.
Yes, the SNP has lashed out at Labour's plans, claims it's the only party that will stand up for Scotland.
Let's talk to the Deputy First Minister of Scotland, Kate Forbes. Kate Forbes, good morning to you.
Good morning.
OK, just regarding these plans by Labour, GB Energy, what are you against? What do you disagree with in the terms of a nationalised energy company based in Scotland?
Well, I think the issue that we have is that neither Labour nor indeed independent experts seem to understand or know what GB Energy actually is. We know that in Scotland, a lot of our jobs depend on the energy industry. We're in the midst of a just transition right now. And independent experts have suggested that their plans will perhaps jeopardise 100,000 jobs in the northeast of Scotland, which is something that concerns us deeply. So our primary concern with Labour's plans is that A, we don't really know what they are, and B, what we do know is that they're likely to jeopardise 100,000 jobs.
Yet the Labour Party has said it will bring in jobs and boost the economy.
Well, they would, but I would also quite like them to tell us what GB Energy actually means and why they think removing, for example, investment allowances will aid the just transition. You know, we all know that we need to reach net zero. Scotland has a brilliant opportunity to lead the way in that regard because of the talent, the skills that we have, the resources, the infrastructure around the northeast and around energy. But Labour appears to be saying to workers there, you'll lose your job now, and there may be some jobs in 10 years' time if you hold on. Our approach is to make sure that it is a just transition, really to listen to the unions in this regard. This is Scotland's primary industry, and for Labour to be putting it at such risk. I don't know if you saw the headlines just last Monday that suggested this was creating apocalyptic conditions for the industry, which is enormously concerning.
You believe it's going to be apocalyptic, do you?
Well, I'm just quoting the headlines that were generated on Monday with the analysis of what might happen if Labour come into power.
OK, when it comes, you said you are committed to green. You said you're committed to green energy. Why ditch the alliance with the Green Party?
Well, in the last few weeks, we have been seeing evidence of the policies that we've put in place. We have seen £350 million invested in a new cable factory just a few miles from where I'm speaking to you right now. Sumitomo, a Japanese company, choosing to invest in the Highlands. This is the biggest inward investment we have seen in the Highlands for the just transition. A couple of miles further down the road, we're seeing £100 million to regenerate a port for the green industry. So what matters to Scots, what matters to my constituents, is seeing the jobs being established, the wealth being created, and ensuring that these communities that have long benefited from energy are a key part of the just transition.
What is your energy plan? You haven't published anything. At least the Labour Party has published something. You haven't published anything yet.
Well, our energy strategy was due imminently, and unfortunately, Purda now ties our hands. So I think you'll have to wait for the manifesto in terms of our energy strategy. But we have been clear what our energy strategy is. We believe that we shouldn't turn the taps off tomorrow when it comes to oil and gas, but we should enable the industry to reinvest in the transition itself. You know, nobody can dispute, and I don't think Labour would dispute this, that the northeast of Scotland is where it's happening when it comes to energy. We have had 40 years of seeing the benefits from the oil and gas industry. And the greatest risk now is that when we transition, that we abandon those workers. And this SNP will not do that. We will not tolerate a transition, as Labour is proposing, that abandons our workers. And you don't need to...
So will you then... You have said you want... You have said you want 50% of Scotland's energy to be renewable by 2030. I mean, you can't tell me your plan, your energy plan, but can you tell me if that would happen?
Well, I can tell you that over 110% of our electricity is currently being generated by renewable sources because of the investment that has been made. And in terms of the forward...
110%? I'm sorry, I don't understand.
110%. So in other words, we are generating more energy from renewables for our electricity needs. And some of that is therefore being exported, of course, to the rest of the UK, which is why we need to see the grid infrastructure invested in. So in terms of our track record, the figures speak for themselves. And so we won't take any lessons from the Labour Party, who've just turned up with proposals for Scotland's energy, which might put at risk 100,000 jobs, when we've already invested in the infrastructure that's required. But clearly we need to go further.
OK, can we talk about the economy and when it comes to taxes and how people are going to be feeling? Can you be clear? The SNP said it's against raising VAT. Can you be clear whether you intend to raise or cut national insurance, income tax, corporation tax? What are your plans?
Yeah, so we've been clear. You may know, but just for your viewers, in the Scottish Government, which is where the SNP is in power, we only have control over income tax and non-domestic rates. But I stick with income tax. We have marginally increased income tax over the last few years, and the latest figures from HMRC illustrate that there are still more Scots or more people moving into Scotland than are leaving Scotland. And I think that illustrates that progressive taxation allows us to reinvest in our public services, which is of significant importance to voters. But we've also said that you can't continually raise tax. So our position at the moment is that, having introduced a progressive taxation system, we want to provide as much stability as possible on that.
So are you going to raise income tax or not?
So we're not going to continually raise tax. We have a system in place.
Not continually, but will income tax rise?
Well, these decisions will be made in our budget. They are not a subject that's under debate in this election because it's a Westminster election. So what Labour do on income tax does have an impact on Scotland because of the divergence, the potential divergence. Our bigger issue is, what does Labour do with Tory austerity cuts? So we're calling today for Labour to introduce an emergency budget if they are elected. Because if they don't, all they're doing is doubling down on Tory austerity cuts. And that has a consequential impact on our budget. The reason that we had to marginally increase income tax this year is because of the cuts to the budget that goes to our NHS, which we then have to try and mitigate against. Labour have said if they're not going to be increasing tax and if they're not going to be reducing public spending, I can't see where else they're going to go. So they must introduce an emergency budget and ensure they don't double down on Tory austerity.
Kate Forbes, Deputy First Minister of the SNP, thank you very much.